your day the grown-up way. Right here. Smooth breakfast. Always fresh and highly informative. The Smooth Breakfast presents the headlines, the stories, the news.
So,
In-depth
odd even.
analysis of national
Yeah,
current
always, man.
affairs.
That's how we roll, man.
Freshly pressed on Smooth 98.1.
Good morning and thank you for joining us for today's edition of Freshly Pressed 981. It's a feel good Friday edition, although some stories are not so feel good, don't feel so good. But we'll do our best to go through the details in a positive manner, if possible. Tunde, that's your responsibility, I guess,
Yeah,
for
I'll
the
try my
first
best.
story. Oh, please, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, please let's celebrate our own. I am utterly sorry for forgetting that day and you not remembering that morning. Tuesday was Waji's birthday, so please wish him a happy birthday. Happy birthday, Waji.
Thank you, Valentine. Thank you, Smooth. Thank you, Tunde. I feel absolutely fantastic. Another year around the sun.
November babies, eh?
Oh
Special
yes, we're
ones.
the
You're
best.
the best.
Special ones. All right, let's start very quickly. A reminder here that you can send messages through WhatsApp 0809 444 0981 0809 444 0981. You can also watch live on YouTube or streaming live. Smooth FM Lagos, excuse me. Type Smooth FM Lagos in the search box and then respond, comment, and share. Our first story today: Ikoyi building collapse. Developer friends' corpses recovered. Death toll hits 40. So that was an update from yesterday, and we everybody was just waiting with bated breath to see if this guy's body will be seen. But 4 days after, now 5 days. I mean, were you expecting a different result?
Unfortunately not, and perhaps that's why you start before all the other things that we possibly or potentially can discuss about this. So the state government has said, the Lagos state government has said that they will conduct autopsies, and people would, you can look at that and wonder, I'm like, okay, so what's the point of conducting an autopsy? Because the outcome is the outcome, but it is still useful to know what exactly. How they died, how they passed away. In a sense, we know that they were caught in the the rubble of the structure, but did they pass away because due to suffocation? All sorts of things, and that takes me to my first point, right? And it's first of all, the lack of an emergency response. When it happened for almost like an entire day or more, it was essentially people in the immediate aftermath. It was people trying to go through the rubble with their hands and shovels, and that is hugely inadequate. There were talks of, and it points to things around there's talk of traffic, the things that we live with in Lagos, and so also things sort of come together to that really hamper our ability to respond to emergencies like this. Even days after, still there's no real evidence of heavy articulated machinery for this kind of purpose, to move rubble, to see if potentially anyone may be trapped within a chamber in there and can be ultimately rescued.
But there are
Right.
tractors there. I saw
Heavy duty
heavy-duty
articulated
articulated
vehicles.
vehicles.
Yeah.
Specifically.
Big difference.
Yeah, it's not tractors for you
Clearing
need,
sand.
yeah, you need specialist equipment for moving things like this. You need to pick stuff up, pick up huge columns, move them aside, try to find people where they are. So that's why it's significant. So I first of all said we should start out there first of all and kind of look at it and say how it's happened, how do we respond? Now then, considering how this happened, and why. In the immediate aftermath of its incidents and situations like this, when also things start to emerge. You hear that always in hindsight, that Lagos state government had put a hold or a halt on the project just a few short months ago, citing all sorts of concerns and maybe the approvals that they had. You see structural engineers on the project. You see the letter go around and saying, that they had withdrawn from the project and asked that their name be removed from the site because they were no longer essentially comfortable with how things were being done. I know we kind of have a tendency in people, we get sensitive in this country when we talk I don't want to say ill, but when we talk unfavorably of the dead, someone who's passed away in such an unfortunate manner, and he's achieved a lot of success. I mean, I had the opportunity to listen to an interview, and he's done developments in the he started in the UK, done developments in the UK, done developments in the US, if I'm not mistaken. South Africa, he's done developments in different places. Never heard of any case or any situation of his.
But why is that? Why is that, Tunde?
Why was it
that in those particular regions he didn't have any issues?
Oh, yeah, that's the point.
That's $1 million question.
That's the $1 million question, right? That's the $1 million question. Why? It's the safeguards, the standards, the system, what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. How you're checked at every single step and instance. It's about people doing their jobs. It's about everyone. It's not about trusting the developer.
Yeah.
Very often here you hear people say, "Oh, I can't buy from, don't buy from these guys. These guys build well. These guys don't build well." You probably have that the world over, but there should be a minimum standard, especially when it comes to safety, especially when it comes to structural safety.
Which is why it's called regulation.
Absolutely.
It's supposed to follow through the
and
process
they're
from start
checking
to finish.
through, right? Things like, even, testing the quality of the, concrete and the, that you're using, the concrete slabs, all sorts of things, stage by stage, right? That's my understanding. I mean, I'm obviously people who are domain experts in this will be able to drill down a bit more, but obviously a lot of things were overlooked and not done right. Now he's not an engineer. The developer is not an engineer, and we see that very often, right? The other sort of thing that I picked out, one from the letter that was issued by the structural engineers, and even from his own interview, his background is not in engineering. His background is not in in building. He's essentially a businessman, a developer, right? And it seems like he didn't always adhere to the advice of his engineers, right? Because again, it's not me saying it. This is an interview of his that I read, and he said, "Oh, his first project. This is not his first project in Nigeria. He'd done a project in Ikoyi before." And he said one of the things he learned there is that the professionals that he learned to sort of measure or taper the information he got from professionals. Because on his previous project, they had he found that it was as though that it was book knowledge and not experiential. That's one of the things they had told him to do. He didn't have to do those kind of things are telling. But in a different environment,
You never say that.
Despite your own leanings, there are systems that kind of check and balance. There's always the tendency to do things for better profit.
Tunde just broke it down so that it can forever be broken. And I think that's where people misunderstand the role of a developer. A developer is your marketing guy, your money man, and that is who he is. He has absolutely nothing to do with the building of that property. He is your front man. He is the guy that goes and sells the vision and tells the story and sells the experience to get people to buy off plan. That's what your developer does, and he brings the money in to get people to do it. Okay? When your developer who doesn't have an engineering or a structural background when it comes to building now gets involved in building, it's a problem. So to Tunde's point, what happens everywhere else and what is supposed to happen here and has happened is that the regulators liaise with the individuals that have the qualifications to build. That is why you have a qualification. You have to belong to the Nigerian Institute of Builders before you can even get signed off, approved to be on this particular project. So when a developer is the one leading that charge, he doesn't have any qualifications, he doesn't belong to the institute, he is not approved and recognized by the state regulators, then that's when we begin to have problems, because greed takes over and you begin to circumvent certain things, and that's why we're where we are. That's it.
And it has a huge knock-on effect on confidence.
Of course.
Confidence in existing projects, investor confidence in projects in Nigeria, because everyone is asking where are the safeguards, right? Even investors who've invested in this, I can imagine that huge litigation will come out as
That's going to go on for 10
consequence
years.
of this, and it'll go on forever. Plus, also, it was one of the three structures that collapsed, right? Then questions around the structural integrity of it.
The other ones, yes.
And everyone
That are
should,
still uncompleted,
that are
by the way.
uncompleted, by the way. And everyone should, kind of pay attention to that. Will in a short while, will we suddenly start to see activity there again? I mean, a very unfortunate developer has passed away, so we expect that this will be a long haul. Things will be stuck for a while. But, that's just so many. It's unfortunate. It's very unfortunate for someone who's achieved so much success, been so successful in his life. In a sense, to say to that in a way that let's say his environment let him down. In this instance, he's been let down. I can't speak on his personal motivations or his conduct on the project itself. I have no idea, but clearly the environment let him down in terms of the checks and balances and being sure. I mean, to all our knowledge, he may have done things to the letter, but then been let down by his his contractors, his vendors, his builders, all sorts of things.
Exactly.
Biggest story of the week. Thank you, Tunde and Waji. Robust analysis, apt as always. Sean says the answer is regulation. Jibril says, do we really have sniffer dogs to assist in this type of rescue
Exactly.
situation?
Good question.
No. Dakpo Lawal says, good morning, guys. Standards are there for people to follow. You are either corrupt and always looking to cut corners or not. It's obvious the developer was not straightforward in his approach to things. It's a shame developers should listen to the professionals they hire. Money is always the driving force for any developer, but it should not be to the detriment of the building's integrity and the people's lives. Onoche says the video has gone viral about how he was stubborn about the engineers and professionals he didn't listen to. Corners he didn't cut abroad. He got away with it here. Now we're here. Greed and tears is the order of the day. Shame, shame, shame. Yinka Bolu said TV interviewed chairman of the Architectural Society Lagos chapter. He said that on the board that where the information of all those involved in this project had no name on it, and when you call the numbers, everything circles back to the developer.
There you go.
Once again, we need to walk the walk and let's ask questions about the average yield strength of buildings in Lagos. Emeka Nelum says, I can bet the buildings in other countries will come under serious review. I heard he has over 30 structures in the US alone. Food for thought. Waji, you predicted this. From the Guardian newspaper, IPOB cancels sit at home, asks Anambrians to vote.
That is
tomorrow.
true. You did predict it.
I mean,
You should add profit to your alias.
Well, I mean, okay. So why did I predict it? Because we had this conversation last week, and there was a bit of back and forth about how IPOB are very stubborn and they're not going to do it. And what I've always said is that you have to look at things from a very landscape point of view. When this sit-at-home order took place I think 6 months ago, thereabouts, but sometime earlier this year, and the reason why the incumbent government did not react was because you had this particular election coming up. And with something like this, you have to be very careful because you do not want to rock the status quo of how things are going, primarily because if you begin to see that these individuals are getting the kind of support or people are complying with the sit-at-home order because they empathize with IPOB and whatever their cause may be, it may be a political ploy to just indulge them and allow them to do what they do. But leading up to the election, especially when you begin to see the heavyweights and the individuals that are involved in now coming to this particular foray, you have to ask yourself as an organization, does it actually make any sense to continue with this sit-at-home order? Why? Because even if it's the incumbent that happened to win re-election or it's a new system that comes into power, there's going to be a review of what you are going to be allowed to get away with. Like I said, the state is only indulging you because it was a political ploy and a political play. So IPOP are being very smart. What they've said is that they've sat down with the Council of Elders. They've taken into consideration the effect that it has on the market and how mothers are now losing income and all these wonderful lambasting things to make them seem like they care, not taking into consideration the actual amount of revenue and livelihoods that have been lost as a result of this, but just given out of sheer coincidence that they're now deciding to have these reasonable conversations a day before the election takes place, which is going to be manned by 34,000 police security presence and everything else. IPOP needed to be very, very smart, and it was a master stroke on their part to now review the sit-at-home order, rescind it, so that way they can now have some peace. Because when you now look at the heavyweights that are contesting for governorship in that particular region, I mean, you have Valentine Ozugbo, and PDP, Andy Uba, APC, Dr. Obiora Okonkwo of the ZLP, Professor Chukwuma Soludo of ABGA, Dr. Godwin Maduka of Accord. I mean, these are not small individuals.
Yeah.
This is literally the heavyweight boxing championship of governorship candidacies that you're going to see in a long time, and it's going to be hot tomorrow. So IPOB looked at it and said, listen,
This is beyond us.
this is beyond us. So let's pull back. Let's make sure that we have done our part to not exacerbate this particular situation, and then we'll just take it from there. So, like I said last week, I saw them yielding because, like I said, the government and the security forces were indulging you because politics were involved. Well, now at the 11th hour, it's time for you to make your move. It's chess, not checkers.
There. This day has this story. Tunde, let's jump right in. Power Minister made a statement that Engineer Abubakar Aliyu, he appeared before the House yesterday, the House of Representatives Committee on Power, to defend the ministry's 301.258 billion naira 2022 budget proposal. He said, explained a lot of things, and actually said, told the House why Mambila and other power projects in the country were not yet developed. Spoke to the electrification of the areas surrounding it and some other issues. What are your thoughts regarding his claim?
Look, same story, or at least a very similar story. So in this case, particularly, he's talking about specific projects, and quite simply, the long and short of the story is that the funding, as again we don't have money, so we borrow for these things, right? Which is good because it's a capital project. It's for power. It's one of the key areas that we need to invest in. But the funding for the project has been deferred to a later date. In this case, it says it's been deferred to 2022. Why has it been deferred? It's been deferred because there is a dispute, or there's some sort of litigation pending around who it was contracted to, or who it was not contracted to originally. So there's some disputes between who they say the initial contractor for Mambila and the Chinese are. So someone was contracted to do Mambila, then the Chinese were contracted to do the project Mambila, and now there's a dispute together saying this contract was awarded to us. We've obviously incurred, to get to this point on this stage, we've incurred costs, and it's our project. It was legally and rightfully awarded to us. But the Chinese are funding. Even if they're not funding this particular project, most likely they are. I mean, to look up on that detail. But we saw it recently. I think we're indebted to the Chinese to the tune of $2 billion USD thereabouts. So
more.
More. So you can imagine that what the Chinese want, typically will go, and that's the issue right here, and that's why this is being delayed. It's a technicality, but who suffers is the people who need power. It's us.
At the end of the day. Thank you so much. As Cisco Delgado says, I like your guest reply on the power situation. Simply the same story. And we'll have messages here. Lutaya says, good morning, guys. IPOP finally woke from their insanity. They finally realized that the election will hold. There will be a low turnout and unpopular candidates will win. Fabian from Ekwe says, good morning, everyone. The building collapse is one too many. Unfortunately, dead men tell no tales. I wonder why action frequently tends to be taken after an incident and not when there are incidents or near misses. NEMA, LEMA, etc. all need to be overhauled and restrained or retrained. Ike Peter says, on IPOP, they couldn't have enforced it at home with the level of military presence in the East. The argument that they didn't want to inflict hardship on the people did not make any sense because they could have thought about that a long time ago. Waji, let's come back to you on the Punch newspaper reports that the independent investigative panel on allegations of human rights violation by the defunct Special Anti-Robbery Squad and other units of the Nigerian police on Thursday insisted that the police must obey its order to produce 3 officers allegedly linked to the extrajudicial killings of one Ovoke on Nomwe Reno. Your thoughts on this, please?
Yeah, it's a PR disaster for the police because this is still going on despite everything that happened post October 20th, 2020. And the police once again missed the trick, and they missed a wonderful opportunity to really win the hearts and minds of people, which is where you actually get things. And that's why I say it's from a PR disaster. And I honestly cannot wrap my mind around why people just don't do things that make any sense. And what do I mean by that? Valentine, if the police had produced these individuals, then even if they gave the appearance that they're trying to hunt them down, they're trying to locate them, they can't find them, they're doing everything in their power to bring them to book, you now begin to get some confidence and you now begin to get some trust within the people who now begin to take you seriously. But when you just make these very vagrant, blatant, ignorant situation statements like you just don't care, then that's when people don't trust you. So why I say it's a PR disaster is that you're not even managing optics, you're not even managing perceptions. And who's advising them? I don't know. So back to this point, produce these individuals. Even if it's the appearance that you are going to produce these individuals, why don't you start there? At least begin to create in the minds of people that you're following due process to bring individuals to book who killed an innocent individual that now sparked this whole NSARS movement. The reasons why we know about it is because it was caught on video. It's not just some speculative thing. They saw it. They saw this young man get executed for doing nothing wrong, but just standing there and just having whatever situation with the police. Produce these individuals, or at least at the bare minimum, from a public relations point of view, give the appearance that you care. Once you do that, you begin to get trust in people. But the fact that you don't want to do that and you don't even see the benefit of doing that is exactly what the problem is.
Just so much damage that they can't even do damage control anymore, I guess.
Nope. Or they don't want to. Yeah.
Okay. Premium Times has this report on the CCB, the Code of Conduct Bureau, on Thursday, spoke on its efforts at investigating past and current public officials suspected to have committed offshore assets and investment violations following a recent Pandora Papers investigation or revelations. We asked this question earlier. Even Sarah had raised the concerns around the report, saying that, these names need to be questioned. People need to be brought forward to answer questions. We hear of Pandora Papers, we hear of, different papers, documents being revealed. Do you think action will follow these words today?
It's interesting you start there. I mean, who knows? It's anybody's guess. But as you know, precedence plays a huge part. I mean, look. So to be honest, I've even lost track of the sort of the naming for these exposures, because the one before this was called, I forget. But in any case, the point I'm trying to make is that it's the latest release in almost like the same body of work. So there's a time that it's all down to data leak, bottom line, and essentially it's been released in bits and pieces, right? So I mentioned that this is not the first sort of exposure that's come from that investigative activity. This is just the most recent, sort of release and batch of, because they followed all the leads on this particular, on the data, on this set of data and everything and all of that. So, I mean, if you're saying would any action be taken, let's, cast our minds back to all the other, exposures and revelations. And it's all down to attitude, right? So there's something that the chairperson, Mohammed Issa, said to Premium Times. That is instructive. They said they acknowledged the Pandora Papers project and what it portends. Underline the word portends. I would like to say big things. We understand what it means. Yeah? As well as the landmark global investigation by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists has created ripples across the globe. So they did two things. They highlighted, we know the implication of this, but remember, this is something that's happening the world over. So
it's
not just us.
Yes.
It's not unique. That kind of gives you some insight into the attitudes and how we sort of, approach these things. That after all, we're not unique. It's not like we have any unique. It's the world over, right? So we will see. It's a roll call, to be honest. Pandora, it's a roll call of who's who and who's who in Nigerian politics and government. Politicians in there, you have people who are, working and or should be. There's the managing director of the acting managing director of the NPA,
Nigerian Ports Authority. Yes.
Nigerian Ports Authority. There's former Minister of Aviation Stella Odua. There's Jagaban. Everyone is there, man. It's really a roll call of who's who. But then down to when it comes to prosecution, it's a question of what are our laws. Because if you listen to Peter Obi's on the list as well, if you listen to he's the only one that's even come out to try to defend himself or explain. The truth is, the use of the structures that are available are in and of themselves not a crime, right? To it might be unethical. It might not be. When I say unethical, it might not. It probably leans more on moral side of it, where like, okay, you're not paying your fair shake in terms of taxation. You're not bottom line, quite simply, is in and of itself not illegal. What laws do we have? Do we have specific laws around what Nigerians can do in terms of what are they allowed to keep funds abroad? invest in shell companies, all those kind of things. We need specific laws to deal with the specific issues here. Now, if we don't have those laws, all of this, none of this is prosecutable. It's just, to fall. Where the issue, however, is in asset declaration. Clearly,
Yes,
if a
yes.
public official says this is what and what and what I have, and you've underdeclared, or at the end of your tenure, you now see to be 1,000x richer than you were when you started office, then questions can be asked as in, Oga, what were you doing between this time and that time that you suddenly are
Exactly.
1,000 times?
Or would you have had this
well
much if you were not in government?
Exactly.
I also find it curious that CCB boss Muhammad Issa had, related to Bukola Saraki case because he stood in front of the CCB, to answer questions and was acquitted of those charges. But he said, "Oh, this is not going to go away like Saraki." But anyway, we move, like they say. We have messages. Oh, by the way, Azuka, thank you, and Bibi, they contributed to this conversation. They said it's Panama Papers, the previous ones.
Panama
Papers. Azuka from Yaba and then Bibi Ladri. Thank you for that. Yinka Bulu says, did I hear IPOB was strategic? When are they of these guys? People that can inflict injury on themselves. Who does the sit-at-home effect? Who does that affect? Is it me in Lagos? Sit at home now. And please, what are they playing? Neither chess nor checkers. What they're playing is Ludo.
I think they've neglected the democratic process. So, every struggle sort of has the militarized arm, the world of, and then also the political side. I think they sort of neglected that. Get involved in the process and system.
And that's when you pull your weight.
It's not just by making mouth.
Yeah. So, and you probably realize that we don't know whether that control is out of fear, but they probably have real control.
Yeah.
And so compliance inside. So put up a candidate. Maybe people vote for them.
Thank you. It's in cases like this that you can actually, a lot of people have said the same thing. Why you decided to? Let's go on to this
their playbooks from Hamas, their playbooks from Hezbollah, their playbooks from IRA, their playbooks from the Muslim Brotherhood. And not to say they're anybody to particularly follow, but they're playbooks regarding how you move from that organization that is seeking self-recognition to a political party. It is actually there in place.
The House of Representatives has said that designating bandits as terrorists will give security forces more power to deal and curtail the spread of banditry. Now, both houses have come together to urge the executive to make this move finally. Make that move right now, baby. So they're talking to the executive to finally do it. Do you think with this weight of voices, urging the presidency to speak, would they finally now, lean into those views?
I can't honestly answer that question because these things are all intentional. Whether they're called bandits, whether they're called terrorists, these are individuals that are acting with absolute impunity when it comes to criminal enterprises in Nigeria. So whether it's your military or it's going to be your police security forces that tackles them is completely inconsequential and irrelevant. So changing the nomenclature from banditry to terrorist to now activate the military to intervene just doesn't add up for me. The point is, how are we even allowing whatever classification you want to give these people the wherewithal to move around? Take them out once and for all, and let's end this conversation. Whether it's done by the military, it's done by whatever security forces in place to handle with them, let's just take care of them and stop jawboning on this issue. That's it.
Thank you. The Punch has this report. Government officials, ESTA codes, others got 3.9 billion in 1 year, according to this report. It says the amount of foreign exchange used for these ESTA codes. I thought they scrapped it a while ago. I mean, that was a few months ago that was going to stop. But I guess maybe like what we call subsidies going to be deferred, maybe. The CBN in its 2020 annual report of its currency operations department released this on Thursday. Tunde, what do you make of it?
Yeah. Okay. So the CBN and ESTA code in its sorry, flipping through for the story.
Yes, please.
Okay. Now, it's strange. There's some interesting things that you. I've tried to look up for the English word of the meaning of ESTA code. It's not an English word.
It's not.
It's not. It doesn't exist. It is a construction. It's a very African construction, and perhaps a very Nigerian construction.
Yeah.
For when we travel into the abroad, that we must take care of allowances, take care of people.
Why don't we just say per diem?
Right, exactly.
Per diem,
She gets.
Why don't we just say that?
Because it's more than per diem.
So that's why you have to call it
Let's call it ESTA code, external code, whatever code you want to call it, because the money is loud, right? And the central bank is obviously now complete. That look, in a country, it's one of those where we're unique in that we don't cut our. Usually, when you want to make something like you want to make a dress, right? what you make is also a function of the fabric that you have, right? You cannot have something that can only make you a blouse and you intend to sew an agbada. Where will you get the rest from? But here we have material to sew an agbada.
Yeah.
Sorry, to sew a blouse, but
Yeah.
we insist on an agbada and we go and borrow the cloth.
Because there has to be extra. in
Because there has to
case.
be extra. Or so that all of us will be closed.
Oh,
all that
yeah.
we can make are blouses. But one guy, which is really what's happening, but one guy, because he's in charge, you say, I'm going to use all the material to make agbada. That's the issue here. And the CBN says that we're groaning under the pressure. It must be that loud, yeah, for the central bank to say that the pressure and weight of, bearing, payments for extra codes is now something that we should, pay attention to.
And you know what's interesting? The fact that CBN is speaking on this, and I mean, drawing from the emotions of Bureau de Change, restrictions, FX restrictions, the head has finally come to roost. They're now like, okay, the problem is actually not the people. Bros, Alpha, it's us though. Because they get these monies at CBN rates.
Yeah.
So if they're getting all these foreign currencies for the ESTA codes, interesting word.
And it ends up in the BDCs, which is again part of what is the central bank. So it's just making money out of both sides of the mouth.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. There's more to share. Please let's continue the conversation on social media with the hashtag FreshlyPressed981. Waji Jivono, Tunde Okufi. Thank you, excellent gentlemen. Waji is at the corporate MC, corporate with a K. Tunde Okufi is at Big Coofs, Coofs with a K as well. KFFS.
K squared.
The K squared. All right, in 9 minutes, I have a special guest. Ebison is going to be my guest on the Feel Good Friday edition of Lagos Talks 981. Stay with me. Valentine Uhu here.
The stories,
Country of
the
thieves.
news, in-depth analysis on national current affairs.